Reedstown, is that right?
Pardon?
They lived in Reedstown.
I guess he did originally, yes. And he came to, he roomed with Kate Lee in that house now, that house. And then his first name could have been Joe, but you know, as kids you had to call them Mr. and Miss. So, and then when Kate Lee died, then Monies got the house, Mr. Money and Mrs. Money, and because they lived at Shannon's Gate there in the lodge.
Right.
It's tumbled down now, there's practically nothing left of it.
Is that where Mooney's are? Is that where?
The same Mooney's.
Okay, Mooney Kitchens.
Mooney's Kitchen.
Okay.
Is
that where Mr. Murray lived?
Mrs. Mooney and Mr. Mooney lived there.
But prior to that,
Kate Lee lived there.
Kate Lee, okay.
Kate Lee.
I'm sorry, I'm
she
just
was a
getting
school
mixed
teacher.
up. I get mixed up with that Mr. Murray. Is it Joe Murray?
Yeah. Well, he just roomed there. He just took.
But it's that house on Mullicanor, is it?
Yeah, Mullicanor.
Mooney Kitchens. It's not.
Mooney's Kitchens. That's the original house.
Okay,
yeah.
not Ryan's Kitchen. You might have said Ryan's Kitchens.
Pardon?
You may have said Ryan's Kitchens, but it's Mooney's Kitchens.
It's Mooney's.
Okay.
Oh, did I say Ryan's?
That's okay.
Oh, I didn't say Ryan's Kitchens. Oh, because Ryan's is down the other end, right? I'm sorry, it was Mooney's Kitchens.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that's correct. I correct that.
Okay.
That was.
And Kate Lee then.
Was Kate Lee's, and then the Moonies lived up in Shannon's Lodge.
Right.
And then they had Joe. Joe lives in the village now. Joe would remember all this. Joe Mooney lives in the village, and then there was the girls, the twins, and then there was a couple of boys,
right.
Donny and another boy.
Yeah.
So they all lived then in that house there. And of course, like I said, it was like 2 rooms upstairs and one down and a kitchen.
Right.
Of course, it's like a mansion now. It's a beautiful home now, you know. But that's where they lived. They moved from Shannon's Lodge to there.
Right.
You know, Joe told me one day how old he was when they moved from there, you know.
Right.
He's just a young fella. So yeah, but they were, you know, Mrs. Money was a very nice family. Very, very nice family.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know why I call that Ryan's, but both being kitchens, you know, Mooney's.
And Kate Lee, what do you know or what have you heard of her?
Kate Lee?
Yes.
Well, Kate Lee, I just know what I'd listened to her talking about, you know. She'd come down the village every Friday to get her pension, and then, you know, she'd stop in and talk to the women and have a cup of tea. And I don't know too much about her background. I know her father worked on the land, and I know that, you know, her mother was a housewife, but I don't know too much how many brothers or sisters she had. But I'll tell you what, Harty Fitzsimons' husband was her nephew.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he was her nephew.
Right.
Barney Fitzsimons was her nephew. And poor Kate Lee, when she got her pension, she liked to hit the bottle.
All right.
Well, what else did she have, right? She'd pick up a couple of bottles, half dozen bottles of stout or so, and go carry them home there. And poor Kate, she was an embarrassment to the family, because sometimes she wouldn't be able to walk too steady, you know, and they didn't think too kindly about you being a drunken woman over drinking then, did they? No.
Did you hear any stories? There was a court frequently held in, I think, where
Pardon?
a courthouse. There was a courthouse.
Well, the courthouse was where the old church is.
Okay, and I think maybe at one time it was in the village. Also, it was held in the village before it went to where the old school is. Sorry, no, I just wondered if you had a memory of any of the cases, because I've heard some stories about really funny incidences.
No, it'd be only like fiddly little cases,
Sure,
like
yeah.
going around without a light on their bicycle
Yes,
at night
yes.
or something like that,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
I don't know how often the magistrate used to come there or not. Maybe once in 6 months, I don't know.
I think the house where Tully's was, at one time, a court was held there.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe so.
But I know it was at the old church there, you know,
Yes.
where they used to have dances and that. I think that's where the courthouse was at point. But then there was there was no crime then, really, was there?
I'm sure you're right.
There was no crime. It'd be just maybe somebody without a bicycle. You know, there was no licenses for dogs, or there was nothing like that. So I don't know what. Or once then there was somebody that they didn't have the weights and measures guy from the government came down, and they didn't have the the scales wasn't properly
Right.
weighing.
No.
Little cases like that you have, you know, nothing of any concern.
Sure.
Because I think for drinking, nobody ever got caught for drinking after hours. Because I remember on Sundays when the men would want to have a drink, then they walked up to Hatton's, because then they were called bona fide.
Oh.
Because you had to be 3 miles away from the area you lived in. Yeah, and in fact I was talking to somebody about that recently, and they said they remember that. They remember Nan Ryan I was talking to about recently, and her Uncle Pat, both her uncles up in the Moy there, they would walk all the way up to Hatton's on a Sunday afternoon with some of the men and for a drink, for a couple of beers, right?
Right.
So it was called bona fide. I don't know why that was, right?
And I suppose the people from Ahern,
Yeah, they
came
marched down to Shaw's probably, yeah. And I remember when the radio first came in, and when there'd be a match on a Sunday, and Shaw's had a radio. They were one of the very few people who had a radio. And when there'd be a big match of some sports, they'd put the radio by the window, the front window, and all the men would gather outside and listen to the radio, to how the match was going.
Right.
And at that time then, as each person got a radio, and I remember when my mother had a radio too, and it was a wet battery, and you'd have to go into trim to have the battery charged and on your bicycle and bring it back home again.
Okay.
So you'd have to be so careful that you didn't spill the acid or anything like that. I remember that, you had to get it charged. But that was quite an advance when they had the radio.
Sure.
And it wasn't on all day long, it was only on for a certain amount of time.
Sure. Do you remember one house I think you may have missed in the village, O'Neill's? I think there was a bakery there in years gone by.
Yeah, there wasn't in my, isn't it funny? I heard a lot, yeah, people told me, as a kid that said that used to be a bakery, but it wasn't in my time, no.
Do you recall the family O'Neill's?
The O'Neills, yeah. They
You-
were farmers.
Okay. Okay.
They were farmers. I can't, Mr. and Miss O'Neill, I don't know too much about their children because they would have been grown up adults anyway, you know, they would have been adults really and truly. So,
Yeah.
but they were farmers, yes. And like different people you know, because if your mother made homemade bread, you needed buttermilk. So naturally the stores, the shops didn't sell buttermilk, or the shops didn't sell fresh milk. So, you know, you got it from the farmers. And you pretty well knew in your area what day the people churned. And then you get the buttermilk. I remember we used to go to White's, Mrs. White, up, you know, the house is still there.
Yes.
We used to get buttermilk from her once a week to make the bread. And the different farmers used to give out, they'd have so much buttermilk, you know, and they'd give it out.
And you would buy the butter from them as well, would you?
We'd buy the butter sometimes, but most of the time, you see, Holmes's would sell country butter. See, the farmers would bring the butter in there too. And Holmes's would sell country butter as well as the regular butter. Actually, the butter didn't come packaged in pounds now. It came in one huge piece.
Right.
And then Mr. Holmes would cut it or whoever was working in the store there. He did have a girl working there. She would cut it like, you know, what she figured was a pound and wrap it up in the wax paper and off you go. And inside the door, like people bought the flour, there was big bins with wheat and flour and for making oatmeal, for making porridge. and all that stuff. You bought that by the weight, so much you'd say. And sugar was the same way, the sugar. And he had the big, and tea, the tea chest, with a huge, all the tea in it. And so he'd have the bag, you know, whoever was working behind the counter, they'd just say a pound of tea or a half pound of tea, and then he just weighed it and gave it to you. Oh, that was it. And then the soap, it came in like yard long, and this big chunk of soap would be sitting there long, and when you go then half pound of soap or a pound of soap, then Mr. Holmes, he cut that with a string, piece of twine. He cut that with twine because he wouldn't use it. You know, he didn't want soap and everything. And that was it. And that's the soap you took home. So your mother, you washed yourself with that, and she washed the clothes with it and off. That's how it was. And then in the fine weather, on a Saturday afternoon, then when the weather was warm, then we grabbed it. We got a towel and a piece of soap, or one family piece of soap between the family, and off we'd go. The whole shebang, a lot of us would go up the new road, and that's where we took our bath. We didn't take all our clothes off. We left our underwear on and took our bath.
Now that was in what they call the Sulian.
No, the Sulian, we didn't bath in the Sulian. No, that was, no, we didn't go there. We went to the new road. The new road was more private.
Okay.
Yeah, not too far up, there's a bridge there, right? Okay. And it wasn't fancy like it is now. It's just an old bridge, and you could walk in because the cattle used to walk in for their drinks, you know. And I think we'd be there taking our bath and all that, and then.
So you had your bath.
And another favourite place for us to take our bath too was it was called Derry Clare. You walk down Ryan's Lane there, and you walk through their fields, and then there's that it's the same river all running along, and you took it in there, and it was just and Shannon's was running on one side, and then I guess that was Ryan's.
Of course, even in the summertime, the water would be very cold, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, we just take our dip in there, and we had to wait till the weather was fine and went there and take our dip. And it was so funny because then, you know, if you were wandering through the fields, and Holmes's fields was one of the ones we had to wander through because it was, you know, it was near closer home. And when you wandered through the field, they had a river going through their fields too. And you'd come along and you'd be playing or doing whatever you were doing, just looking around you, killing time. And if you got thirsty, you just cup your hands and drink the water. And when I think of it now, further up along the river would be the cattle going in drinking the water, and they emptied out completely in there too, but that didn't do us any harm. We drank it anyway and we lived. No hygiene there, let me tell you. I often think of that, how we would drink that water and the cattle going in. Oh, never mind, we lived, right? We didn't die.
They're amazing stories.
No.
Do you have any recollection in particular about Christmas and about Santa Claus or anything like that?
Christmas was so exciting. You go up to Langford's and you get the holly up there. There was plenty of holly up there. Oh, there was lots of holly trees up there. And you'd look, they had two kinds of holly there. They had the variegated one, which they still have, but they had huge holly trees, huge ones. And you get the holly and you get the ivy, and it'd be so exciting. You'd be thinking about Christmas and what you were going to get. And then the mothers would be all making the Christmas puddings and the fruit cakes, and it was just such an exciting. And for a long time ahead of time, you know, in Holmes's they'd be selling the raisins and the currants and the candy peel and all that. And I remember the mothers just have to hide it because the kids would eat the candy peel on them because that was nice. So it was just such an exciting time then, you know, with Christmas coming. He didn't get that much for Christmas, really and truly, you know. I remember one time, my father was in England then, and my father had kind of disappeared from the planet for a long time. The war broke out, and then my father had kind of disappeared. So anyway, one time, and my mother would go to Dublin then to do the shopping, and you'd mostly get like socks and gloves or stuff like that. You didn't get too much in the toy department. They'd have little guns. My brother would get a little gun, and you had those caps you put in and then off that. And probably we'd get little dolls or games. She was big for buying us games like snakes and ladders and all those games, because that the kids could all play with that. And then one day she went to Dublin, and the kids were very responsible then. I was about 9 years old, and she said to me, now she'd go on the 9 o'clock bus and she'd be back in the 6 o'clock, and she said, now you take care of the children, right? The others, and don't let them go near the fire, because at that point everybody had opened fires. Sure. She said, don't go near the fire, whatever you do, and there's such and such a thing you can have. Now I'll make dinner when I come home, and you can have some milk and some bread and jam and stuff. That was the average things kid had. And so that would be it. And then when she came home, she thought I did such a good job. I had the potatoes washed and in the pot and ready for her to do whatever she had to do. And she said, oh, I did such a good job and all that. So when the other kids went to bed, they were younger than I was, so then she gave me a present. And then later on, she said to me, I always remember this, isn't it funny? She said to me, then now she'd give me something because I did such a good job. Now she didn't have anything else to give me, right? So she said to me, there's no Santa Claus. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. I must have been pretty foolish at 9 years old, didn't know, right?
Sure,
but the kids didn't tell each other. They didn't tell anybody. So anyway, she said there's no Santa Claus. I can still remember sitting there and thinking, why is my mother lying to me? There has to be a Santa Claus, right? So she finally got into my head, no, there was no Santa Claus. And then she comes and she said, now we'll fill the kids' stock. And whatever little things they were getting, a doll, and my brother got the gun, and somebody else got another little doll, and that was, maybe a pair of socks or whatever it was. And I just couldn't believe, it just was the end of a fairy tale, right?
Of course.
But I couldn't believe that this was, because I thought, the kids didn't wise you up. You weren't very smart at that age, you just believed what you wanted to believe,
Sure, of course.
Which to me was a wonderful time, Christmas, and it was just a great time.
And the Christmases then after that, they were special in a different way, I suppose, were they?
Pardon?
The Christmases after you found out about Santa Claus, the Christmases that followed, they were still special, but in a different way.
Oh, they were very special, yeah, they were very special, because it was kind of like a feast, It was like the feast, you'd think, oh, we're going to have cake. You wouldn't be having Christmas cake every day of the week or anything like the average thing. On weekends, your mother might make a cake with raisins in it and currants in it or something like that. Bake a cake, but it wouldn't be a rich cake. It would be just a plain cake. All the women did that, So Christmas was you'd be thinking, oh, we'd be having chicken or whatever it was we were having. Probably chicken it would be, because my mother used to raise chickens, and she'd roast it in the oven pot over the fire, and you had to have turf because that held the heat over the oven. It's amazing how they used to cook over the fire in the ovens and bake bread and everything like that. You had to have the heat just right, and then you knew that, and lemonade. There'd be lemonade at Christmas. One bottle of lemonade for us at Christmas. And she'd make jello and custard, stuff you wouldn't have every day, jelly you call it, what do we call it? Jelly and custard, and stuff you wouldn't have every day, so. And you'd have those peas you soaked overnight. Do you remember those?
Of course,
yeah. You can buy them in tins now, right? So you'd have those peas, and it would be so potatoes roasted, and it would be so good. The feast would be so great, right?
Do you remember when the electricity came?
I was in England then.
Okay.
Was I? No, I was in. That must have been. I remember when they were working on it. I remember when they were working on it, because I remember my brother was very handy. Jackie was very, very handy, very mechanical. He was like my father, very mechanical. There was nothing he couldn't do, and he had said to my mother, now when they're putting in the electricity, just get them to bring it as far as the house, and I'll come home and wire the house up for you. Because at that point we had at that point we were not living in the village any longer. We were living outside the village. You know, once you leave the village after you pass McCormick's Gate, and there's 2 houses on the left-hand side.
Okay, yes.
The second house.
Oh.
We lived in we were the first people to live in. My mother was the first person to live in that house there, and so he said, well, just bring it into the house, just get it as far as the house, and I'll wire up. I'll come home and wire up, which he did. He did, and it was great because before that we had when I came home from England one time, I remember buying my mother a chili lamp. That was a big advance then because it was a nice, rather than having the oil lamps and the candles, it was a nice bright light, you know. So that we were still in the village then, but he had said, you know, just let it go like that. So that was great when they got the electricity, wasn't it?
Can you remember your first dance, when you started dancing? And
Oh, we went the first in Dangan.
okay.
We used to go to dance when they'd be in Dangan every once in a while. We go to dance, and in Rathmaline every once in a while there'd be a dance. But Dangan once in a blue moon. My mother, she was a good singer, and my sister Kathleen, who lives in the States, she was an excellent singer. But my brother and my sister Evelyn and I, we couldn't carry a note. My mother said, you can't dance because you can't sing. And in school, I used to feel very left out. Because when Mrs. Gogarty, once a week she had singing classes, you know, and you always gathered around a circle. She'd be here and we'd gather around a circle. And so I used to think to myself, how can she, you know, when they'd be singing away there, I'd join in and she'd say, May Farley. And I'd say, how in heaven's name? This was a mystery to me, how she could know that I was singing in there, you know, probably throwing the whole shebang of the works right off, right? Didn't have couldn't sing for the life of me. Still can't sing. So that was that part. So then...
but the dances were in Dangan or...
In Dangan, in the old church.
Right.
In the old church.
Okay.
It's a lovely house now, isn't it? But
At what age would you be when you first went to dance?
Oh, probably about 15 and a half.
Okay.
About 15 and a half, right? When I first went to dances, yeah. I was about 15 and a half.
Right.
So.
And can you recall who supervised them or what type of music was that?
Kelly's was the one. And then Lee Mallon came down then, and he had a band. Him and Raymond had a band going. They weren't Dublin, they had a band going. And then by that time, then I was gone. Then I was working in Dublin then.
Tell us about that part of your life then. Whatever you'd like to tell us about. You know, as you moved on and left Summerhill, where did you go from there?
Well, when I left Summerhill, then I went from Summerhill. I went to Dublin, and I worked in Dublin then.
Right.
I worked in a shop in Dublin. My aunt, see, all my mother's family lived in Dublin. So, and we were used to going there, like, you know, my cousin Nolene Pearl, her mother, my Aunt Lena, my mother's sister, she was like we were always very close to her, and we always could go to Dublin anytime we wanted. And she'd always say, oh, send the kids up, and, you know, on holidays in the summer, whatever you want. And we used to, the rest wouldn't go. They were very attached to home, and naturally my brother wouldn't go. So, but the other kids wouldn't go because they didn't want to leave home. So even at a very early age, I went to my aunt's in Dublin, and then we would always on Friday. It was such a nice life there. On Friday, my uncle, when he came home from work, he always gave each one of his 2 children and myself. We all got pay, 6pence we got, and then on Saturdays we went to the matinee downtown, the oldest boy and I. And then it was such a nice, because on Friday night she'd have fish and chips. And it was just a lovely family life there, you know. And so then when the summer be over back, I might stay a couple of weeks there and then come back home again. And then... Did
you say that was in Dorset Street?
She lived, my aunt, she lived on Brabazon Square. It was off Grey Street. It wasn't too far from Meath Street, actually.
Okay.
A couple of blocks from Meath Street, so she lived there. So then when I wasn't working at Austin's anymore, then I went to work in Dublin, and then I worked in a shop on Thomas Street, which was around the corner from my aunt again, not very far. I worked in a shop there, it was called Duffy's. So then I stayed there for...
What type of a shop was that?
It was a drapery shop. It clothes, sold clothes. And then it sold material by the hour, but they sold clothes. And then from there then, I went to Belfast.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I stayed in Belfast for about...
And what brought you to Belfast?
I went to... My mother, she had a relative there at the hospital on Crumlin Road. And I can't even remember the name of that hospital. It was a Catholic hospital. And one of my mother's relatives was a nun there. And she was in charge of the menus or whatever they had there going, you know, the diets or whatever they had going there. So I worked with her there, and that was she was very strict. Like, you lived in the nurses' quarters, and then if you went out, you had to be home by 8 o'clock at night, and you really had to be, because the nun would be sitting there waiting for you. When you were going back into the nurses' quarter, the nurses had to be home too. All the student nurses had to be home in at a certain time, and you'd be very strict there. So, but I loved it there anyway. So I stayed there anyway for quite a while, a long time then, and then I went to London.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, then I went to London, and then in London, then I got a job there in an office. And then I went with a friend because she had a relative in London who we could stay with. So I think I got a job in an office, and then I got a job in another place, and I got a job in the Regent Palace Hotel, and that's where Harriet Fitzsimons worked there as a waitress. Right. And I worked in the front desk as reception and cashiering there, and on the foreign exchange.
In the Regent Palace?
Pardon?
In the Regent Palace.
Regent Palace Hotel, yeah. That was a good place. It's still there.
So you met all sorts of very interesting people who would come to the desk.
Yeah, that was a good place to work, yeah. That was a nice place. And all the office help, they all had to wear black dresses, black shoes, black stockings. But it was a nice place to live and to work, and we got our meals there too when we worked. And you met very interesting people. Like I said, you met people from all over the world there. So I stayed there until I went to Canada. Then I went to Canada. Wow. Oh, that's where I met my husband then. He was staying there.
A guest in the hotel?
Yeah, and he was staying at the Regent Palace Hotel, and he was staying with a bunch of guys were there, a bunch of Canadian fellas. He was a marine engineer, so the ship was in, so somewhere at the London docks. So he was. It was a merchant ship, so he was staying there. So that's how I met him.
Huh.
And then I moved to Canada.
And
I got married and moved to Canada.
Okay, so your courtship days were in London?
Pardon?
When you met your husband and you were courting your husband, that was in London?
Yeah, but we'd be back and forth, like he wouldn't be in all the time. When a ship would come in, then, the ship would go out, and they'd be gone, and then they'd come back in again. Okay. And so
that was over a number of years?
Yeah, it was over, a couple of 2 or 3 years, 2.5 years, I'd say, yeah. So
and he was Canadian?
He was Canadian, so then I married him, and then I went to live in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. And then I worked in an office there. So then he got transferred then to Brooklyn, New York. Well, then he was becoming he was going to work in a shipyard. They didn't go out to sea.
Traveling.
No traveling. They couldn't work. So that's where he got the job in Brooklyn, New York, in the shipyard there.
So you moved there?
So moved there, and I worked on Fifth Avenue, New York.
Wow. And tell us about that.
Oh, I worked for a while in a bank in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Yeah.
Wow.
And my mother said, "I'm so proud of you working in a bank." And I said, "It's no job, Mom. It's just a regular old job." Because she thought, when I think back as a kid, it was such a prestigious job to be a bank clerk, right? I said, "Oh, Mom, don't think it was just a regular old job, right? Just an office job." only a little bit more fussy there because you had to watch you didn't make mistakes or you'd be in trouble there with the cash, right?
You have some experience, my God.
Pardon?
You had some experiences in your life. It's just incredible.
But I'll tell you what, who was instrumental in my life, Mrs. Gogarty, the school teacher.
Okay.
She was, because going to school, I was very, very good at, they called it arithmetic then.
Yes.
You know, it's math now, but I was great at arithmetic at school. So she gave me the encouragement. She was the one that, you know, said to me, well, you're so good at it now, you'll do good there, you know. Don't get stuck working around Summerhill, she'd say. Go ahead. But then when I got older, then I could go. You see, when I was young, my mother wasn't going to let me go head off somewhere, right?
Of course. But go back to Fifth Avenue. Tell us about your...
Oh my God, Fifth Avenue. I couldn't believe that place, right? I couldn't believe the office I worked in. It was absolute. It was, when I went for the interview, I remember the personnel one. She was a Jewish lady, Miss Wilde. And anyway, see, they were really wanted someone that was good at math, you know. So they gave you tests then.
And what type of a job did you apply for?
I got, there was payroll.
Oh.
Payroll. So anyway.
So it was, sorry, a department store, was it?
No, Fifth Avenue was an office, huge office.
It was an office, okay. So
huge office,
so
huge.
there's a lot of staff.
Oh, yeah, 1,500.
Wow.
1,500 people worked there. And I was, another fella, and there was only 2 Irish people there, another fella and myself. He came from Clare. So we worked there, and it was like, oh, it was a huge place. And it was this very, very gorgeous office across, and it had a doorman and everything. And it was across from the library on 500 Fifth Avenue. And it occupied 2 floors there. We were on I think the 15th floor or something like that. So it occupied 2 floors because certain times you'd have to go down the next floor to get something. So that I liked that job. That was a nice job there. And then after doing payroll for a while, then they moved me into accounting. And then I stayed in accounting. And then by that time then, sort of 56, 60. Then they were moving out then. See, this was a massive office, and they took care of the whole United States. And then they were moving out then they were breaking them down then into regional office. And they were going to put them in 4 parts of the United States rather than have this massive office in New York. And see, all the mail would have to come into there, you know.
What was the name of the company?
Electrolux.
Electrolux.
They were in the vacuum cleaning business, but we weren't part of that. We were just the office part of it.
Yeah.
And so it was a big. It's still there. It's still around. They're not in New York now. They have branches now, sales offices, but then the big offices are still like scattered throughout the 4 parts of the United States. So then when they broke them down, then their head office in Stamford, Connecticut, that would be the executive office. And then they have, like in Chicago, they have a huge office, and Atlanta, Georgia, and out west somewhere, and then in California, they have a huge office. So they were massive places, really big places. So it was very, very nice working there, and very, very. And you met all kinds of different people, always Americans, they were all Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah, all Americans. It was very, very nice there.
And after that experience?
Well, after that then, my husband had died suddenly.
Oh dear.
Yeah, he had a blood clot.
Oh.
Death was instant. So then...
He was quite young then, was he?
Pardon? Yeah,
he was
40 years of age. So death was instant. So then I went out then to work in Chicago for training. Then when they were open expanding then there, and then I went to train people there. Oh, you had to take a test, another test. But that was okay, I passed it. So anything to do with math would be fine, right? Oh, and typing, I did typing in London, and shorthand, I did that in London. So, but there wasn't much typing came into this job, it was all machines, adding machines all the time. So then from there, then I went out to, the first office I went to was Atlanta, Georgia. And then they put you up in a hotel and all that, and then I was there for 6 or 8 weeks training. And then I went back again to the head office in New York. And then from there then they were opening up again in Chicago, went to Chicago. And then Philadelphia for another 6 weeks, and then somewhere else we went to Arizona for another 6 weeks.
Oh.
Then back
Training other people.
training other people. When they'd open up big new offices, big new regional offices, so you'd train them in the whatever field you were in. So I was in the accounting one, so I would train them in that field. And then back again to, then they opened up one in Springfield, Mass. So that was the last one then. Then if you went back, there was no more New York then, that was closed. Then you had to go to Stamford. So I kind of liked Springfield, Mass. I really liked it there. And I stayed there because it was a city, a small city, and it was nice. So, and it was like 90 miles from Boston and 120 miles from New York. So that was a very, very nice, good location, very good location. So I stayed there then.
And any more experiences then?
Pardon?
Had you any further experiences then?
No, I stayed on there then until, let's see, when I was 60 then, I started having very bad eye problems. And then then at that point then, I figured, the doctor said, you know, your eyes are not, you shouldn't really be working, you should go for I needed a cornea implant. And then I was able to retire then, so then I retired. So then eventually went to Boston and had the cornea implant. And then everything was fine. But then I'd already retired, so that was fine with me then.
Okay. And there was no other...
no more jobs, volunteer jobs, just volunteer jobs.
Tell us about your voluntary jobs. What did you do there?
Pardon?
In voluntary, what voluntary work did you do?
I worked in the nursing homes.
Oh.
And in the hospitals.
Wow.
Yeah, whatever job would come along, right? Like sometime, like in the they were all good. They were good in the whatever you want to do. You know, maybe sometimes as a volunteer, you'd have people that were quite sick in the hospitals, and then they'd need feeders. You know, you would just be part. They'd call you up and say, "You want to come in? And then they had people that would feed the people that were very sick and help them that were sick, you know. So you were there. And then sometimes it might be a place where you might be in one of the areas where they used to call it eye in and out, And then that place, then the food would be measured going to after you were, whoever trained you for this one, after, like they'd have stomach surgery, and then they used to measure the food, how much food that person took. And then also, if the person got sick, that had to be measured too. As they used to say, don't sniff or you're finished on the measurements. So anyway, that was that. And then sometimes it might be like going around with a gift card, selling the gift card, cards or sweets or chocolate bars, something like that. They'd have all kinds of jobs that you could do, And sometimes you might be just sitting talking to them, or someone that had no visitors. But of course, nowadays, they're in and out of the hospital in no time now. There's no long stage. The nursing homes are better for that, because if they have major surgery now, they might be in the hospital 2 days or 3 days at the most, because the insurance won't carry you there that long. Then you go to a nursing home. But the nursing homes there are like, the hospitals are gorgeous there. There's only 2 to a room. And the nursing homes are like that place, what do you call that, private place outside Trim?
Sure, Knightsbridge.
Yeah, they're just like that, the nursing homes.
Okay.
They'd have 2 to a room too.
So did you continue to live in Massachusetts then? You did?
I still go back there all the time.
Okay.
Well, sometimes I go back for 5 months now.
Okay.
I just came back. I was there from November until March 1st, and then I was there last month for a month.
Right.
And then I was in London for a week prior to going to there, and then I came back again. But the reason my stay was shorter in the States is because I had an appointment with them. When I was in London in July, the Moorfields Eye Hospital, an appointment with them they gave me an appointment for just a couple of weeks ago, so I had to come back to go to them again. And then, so now I can go back to the States. So now I'll be going back to the States probably November 1st until probably April or so. But I will go to Florida while I'm there.
Right.
Yeah.
And you like to spend some time in Florida as well?
Yeah, I will this time. Yeah, I will this time.
Okay.
I did sometimes. About 2 years ago or so, I went to Florida for 3 months from here, you know, so whatever. But last year I stayed in Massachusetts for the winter. Oh, there was so much snow. It was just snow all the time. But then the houses are beautifully heated, you know.
Yeah.
That's why I had this room built here, because there's floor heating here.
Sure.
Are you cold? Do you want the heat on?
Oh, not at all. No, it's
No.
not. No, it's
I'm
not.
always frozen, you know. I'm always got the heat on, for heaven's sake. So that's why this room was built, because it has floor heating. It's very, very warm in here.
Sure.
And plus it captures the sun too. So
Beautiful, beautiful, yeah.
yeah. So that part is good, because I'm always cold. I think it's because being used. See, I don't in the radiators. It seems you don't get enough heat out of them for me here, right?
Sure.
You know, it's like some people come in here and say, "Oh, it's roasting to death here." You know, but to me, no, it's comfortable, right?
It is indeed, it's comfortable.
Because I like to have it about 75. What would that be? 75? Take away 30, 45. Be about 20, 23 or so.
Nice.
See, whereas the average person here wouldn't run it at 23 degree. You know, in your heatings.
Not, I don't think so, no, probably more like 16 or, yeah.
Yeah, you'd probably roast to death, right? But you see, in the States, I'm used to having it at 75, so, you know, in the winter, so. And like, you'd never, like here I use the electric blanket all the time, but there you'd never need it, because when you go in to get, like, everywhere's like nice and warm, like.
Of course.
So.
You mentioned that Mrs. Gogarty, your teacher, you know,
Yeah, she was influential in me.
gave you, a particular...
Yeah, she gave me the courage that I would face anything.
Is there anything else that you can remember particularly that, you know, a pleasant, something that influenced your life? She certainly did. Was there anything else that influenced the way your life took? That you can
No, it wasn't going to take me anywhere, but I guess it was like when you made your confirmation at 10, then you had the Bible for the 4 years you were down here. So then I was excellent at the Bible, you know. I was the best, she said, at the Bible. I was so well informed about the Bible. But then when I think back on it now, it probably was because you didn't have libraries, you know, where you could go to and all that, and it was just something to read. The Bible was quite a large book. The school, did you have a Bible in you when you went to school?
Yeah.
It was quite a good large book, and you just read it, all the stories, so I suppose I just memorised it all, you know. But she was very, very instrumental in my life, Mrs. Gogarty, you know. A lot of the kids didn't like her, but I liked her. I liked her.
Of course. It doesn't sound as though you could possibly have any regrets in your life, but is there anything?
Oh, no regrets, no regrets. No.
Nothing you would have changed?
Oh, I had a wonderful life. I had just the most wonderful life, thank God. Thank God for that, yeah.
It's extraordinary to hear where you, in your youth, went to have your bath in the Derry Clare, and later on you were working on the 15th story in Fifth Avenue.
500 Fifth Avenue, very classy place.
That's an amazing journey.
I know, and then it's like when I worked in a bank in Nova Scotia, you know, and my mother said, "Oh, I'm so proud of you, you're a bank clerk," and I said, "Oh, Mom, it's nothing," and I said to her, "Please don't." This is funny. Please don't tell the people, because they won't believe in it. It's a nothing job, you know. Because I remember when I was a kid growing up, Captain Fowler?
Yes.
His son worked in a bank.
Okay.
And he was a big shot because he was a bank clerk, right? And you'd hear him going into trim on the motorbike every morning and coming home. He has a big job. He's a bank clerk, right? Forget that. You know, it's just an office job. But I don't know why they put such such a, they thought, was it that, did they say that when you were a kid growing up?
Oh, of course, absolutely, absolutely, yes.
But why? I wonder why? Why that was such a prestigious job, for heaven's sake.
I suppose the fact that we had so little money.
And they didn't pay good even. They don't even pay good.
Yeah, and if you were in contact with money, you had to be important.
Oh yeah, and if you better not be short, let me tell you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did you ever go back to Halifax after?
I go back all the time. My
do you?
in-laws, yeah, my in-laws.
Oh, right.
Oh yeah, I love my in-laws. Yeah.
Okay.
They're nice. Well, what's left? There's none of them left. I only have a brother-in-law left. He was a doctor in Montreal. Oh, he's in Toronto now. He's retired. And then I have just a sister-in-law in Nova Scotia. Yeah, I go there all the time.
Great. Wow.
Mm-hmm. And we talk all the time and all that. Yeah, the families are. Oh, there's lots of nieces and nephews and everything like that, but that's the closest family. That's all that's left, you know. But
that's really the most amazing account, and I'm not exaggerating. That is the most amazing account I've ever heard.
And it was all over. I really was all over the world when you think about it. I really was like. The only place I hadn't been to, because my brother-in-law, he was with the Canadian consulate. So he was with NATO. He was first with them in France and then in Belgium. So I used to go to visit them. I used to go with my mother-in-law and we'd all go there. Well, I was in different parts of the world. She was in Canada, but I was in the States then. And we'd go there. And that was really nice. And then he would take us all over the European continent, right? All over the place. And then the only place I hadn't been to, and I really wanted to go, I've no desire to go to Australia, absolutely not. But I always thought about South Africa would be so great a place to go to. And I always thought, South Africa, that sounds very exciting. It just sounds different, right? Mm-hmm. So I have very good friends here in Dublin. They were in London. And I got to know them when my sister Evelyn, she eventually, her husband, Willie Ryan from the castle down there, not the Undertakers, when he died anyway, then she came out to the States and she stayed with me for quite a while. And then she met this man there. He was a retired businessman. So she eventually, his wife was dead and her husband was dead, so she married him. So, and he died. He was much older than her, 20 years older than her. So he died in March, and she got cancer and died in October.
Oh,
yeah, now she's the one. She had two sons. One is blind, Adrian. He comes here occasionally, and she's another son, Billy. Billy is partially sighted, and I don't know why the eyes took such a step with us, because my parents didn't have anything wrong with their eyes. So anyway, when so she was in the States, so she wanted to come. I was in the States then, so she's had a house in London. So, and she kept it after she got married, went to the States. So when she knew she only had 3 months to live, she wanted to come back to London again. Like she said, no, she wanted to die in London. So I went back with her anyway, and I stayed with her until she died, and then I stayed on to sell the house. And then I met some very good friends, and he was a doctor there, and his wife was a school teacher, and they had 4 children. And then he's back now here in Ireland. He's been back in Ireland for about, I'd say the last 10 or 15 years. And he's a doctor in Dublin, and so very, very good friends with them. In fact, I'm going next week to stay. They have a place in Ballsbridge. I stay with them. And so then, it's this week. So then so they were going to South Africa. So when I was in London then, so I'd pick up their children from school, and the children would come and stay with me, or I'd go over their house after I was waiting to sell the house. I didn't want to be sitting idle. So anyway, they were going to South Africa about 5 or 6 years ago. So they said, because their son was playing rugby, so they said to me, do you want to come? Because you always said you'd love to go to South Africa. And I said, oh, that'd be great. I said, so off we went to South Africa. They're young. They're not any more than 60 now. So we went to South Africa, and I figured, oh, this is great, because if I get sick, at least he's a doctor, right? So we're all set. So we stayed in the here I had this build up of South Africa. We stayed in this beautiful hotel, and you'd look out the window over towards a little park out where those houses are, and there'd be people sitting, men would be sitting there with their belongings in a bag or whatever they had, just sitting there, young men, no work. On the way down, then he rented a car there, so we went all over the place. On the way down, when you passed the train station or the bus station, there was all these people just sitting around the park, laying on their few belongings, with no future, nothing whatsoever. And that, do you know, that made me so sad. Here was the people living in wealth and luxury and all that. A gorgeous modern city, Cape Town was. And here was those poor people with no future, young men just thrown by the wayside, no hopes. And that really saddened me. I never thought the same about South Africa again, you know, because I hate to see poverty and injustices and stuff like that, but not a wasted life, not a hope for them.
As you travelled and all your incredible working career, Summerhill was always in your mind, was it?
I always came back, but then, I had a house in the States, and then even when I was in London, that was fine. But then I still had this house. I must have had this house for about 25 or so years, because I figured it was always somewhere to go, because it's better to have a place to go to than have to stay in with relatives or friends. You know, as you get older, you know how you feel like it doesn't work out as well. You know, you're better off. So then I still had this place in the States until about 3 years ago. And then I decided, no, hey, listen, I'm getting really old now. I better make up my mind where I want to be. But when it came to healthcare, the States would be the best one for healthcare. Right. Yeah, they're way up there in the healthcare department. And but as it is, then I sold the house and then I stayed on here. But it's still, I'm probably spending half the time over there anyway, so it doesn't really make any difference, you know. Sure. And then I say to myself, why didn't I have them? My cousin's daughter bought the place. She got the place for me because I had told her. But I say, well, why didn't I pick Trim? There's something to do in Trim. There really is, right? You know, there's a great bus service, and there's restaurants, and there's things you can do around Trim. You can walk around Trim, but you're pretty limited here. I say I'm going uptown, I'm going downtown here, but
I know, sure.
There's not much to keep you going, is there?
No, I suppose not. No,
you have a car, so you drive, so it's fine.
For someone, and you're not young.
No, I'm going to be 90 in January.
Oh my God. Well, you're just so amazing.
Thank you.
But for someone of your age, you're incredibly interested in things still and active. And most people at probably 70 would be saying, this is a nice place to be. I don't want to be going here and there. So, I mean, you're so brilliant. This is amazing.
Well, you know what? When people say to me, I had to be quite insulted when people said to me, are you travelling alone? Like I'm so decrepitated, am I going to make it? I want to say, of course I'm travelling alone.
But in a sense, it's a compliment.
Yeah,
you know, because
I don't know, but I feel.
Wouldn't.
But then I feel, do I look that decrepitated and falling apart here?
Hardly, quite the opposite. But it's a compliment nevertheless, because perhaps.
Are you travelling alone?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or when they say, would you need a wheelchair? Like when you order your ticket or something like that. Not if I go into Dempsey's, naturally, no, they wouldn't say to me. But if I happen to be in Dublin and think, hey, listen, this is easier than going into Dempsey's, and the girl I know there, listen, they don't work on commission, so it doesn't make any difference whether I get the sale there or somewhere else. You know, the girl doesn't get a commission. So anyway, she's on salary. So if I'm in Dublin then, and I do it in Dublin and won the trial, it doesn't make any difference what travel agency is. And they say, "Will you need a wheelchair?" And I said, they all, because they have to find out, you have to show them your passport so they have the number on record, and then they see your age and say, "Will you need a wheelchair?" And they out of the mind, I said to myself.
You can put your luggage into it.
And I always say, God forgive me, I always say when I need a wheelchair to myself, I wouldn't travel anymore, because I look at people that need wheelchairs and I say, oh, I wouldn't travel. Would you if you need a wheelchair?
I'm not sure, but I'd like to have half of the spirit that you have. And if I had, I probably would.
So anyway, but I think my biggest interest in life is nature. I think that now I walk to Dangan Church every day and back, and if there's a dog straggling around that needs a walk, I'll take him with me, right? But fortunately, my neighbour next door, Angela, she's dog sitting this weekend. It's a nice little dog to take for a walk. It's a good little walker. So, but when I'm on my own, I bet you, I look at every tree and every bush and every plant, and this down, and the priest has the best garden. I take a walk around his garden too. He has everything in that garden, the priest. Yeah. Oh my heavens, did you ever walk through his garden?
I know he has a lovely garden, yes.
Oh my gosh, he's got beetroots, and he's got scallions, and he's got onions, and I can't believe all the stuff he has. He knows I walk around and look, right? So now my latest approach to him was, I'm looking at his beetroots and the big heads, and in the States you have to buy the leaves of the beetroots. Right. The beetroots come separate, and then the leaves you buy. Yeah. They're delicious. Don't try them. Yeah. Yeah, and if you were cooking a piece of bacon or something, or even just to wash them and cook them like cabbage, and then just put salt and pepper on them, a little bit of butter, and if you like vinegar, put vinegar on. Yeah. But they're absolutely delicious. And they waste them here. You have to pay big money in the States for those things. So I said to the priest, you should try them there. So then Father David happened to be coming along, at that point. And I said, Father, you should try them. And Father David says, oh, all right, I'm going to get him to cook them for me sometime, because he's an excellent cook. He said, the priest is an excellent cook. Right. But isn't it great, the garden he has? Absolutely. And he has a hothouse. Absolutely. Not too much activity in there. I look in there now. And then coming along, then there's the horses there. There's a field between Ryan's farm, and there's horses in there, and there's a small one. So I'll pull some branches off the trees and feed them to them, and then I'll check out the flowers, see what flowers are growing and what's not growing. And there's no slows this year.
Is there? Okay.
No, there's no slows this year, and there's hardly any apples.
Right.
No, and there's no plums this year. People that like Ryan's Kitchens, I have it right this time. They have plum trees, and they usually have an abundance of plums. Okay. And they have no plums this year, only a few. So I guess all the fruits are very scarce this year.
Perhaps there was a late frost or something that killed the buds, the flowers.
It's a shame, because there were so many apples around for the last 3 or 4 years that you don't have apple trees, do you know?
I used to have, and I actually gave them to my daughter, who was set up house, and I don't have them myself anymore. No. Unfortunately, they're lovely to have, but maybe not used enough. They tend to fall off the tree and are not. It's a bit of a waste.
You have to use them, yeah.
Unless you have a big family type thing.
I know, because as I mentioned to you before, my friends Lee's, they have a home down in Kilcormac. It was their original home. His parents' original home, and they still have it, and they go down on weekends or sometimes during the summer. And they have a lot of apple trees there, and usually I get the apples there, and they'll bring them up to here, and I give them round to the neighbours. Excuse me, when I was talking to her on the phone, she said no, they have no apples this year. She said, so I guess there's a scarcity everywhere.
I'd just like to thank you on behalf of everyone who gets to see this.
Oh my goodness!
For taking us on such an
Except
amazing.
I made that mistake about
You made no mistakes.
Monies
Not at all.
Monies.
It was a fabulous experience to take us where you did, all over the world virtually.
Oh yeah, we didn't have a great life.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
You're so fortunate, and we're so fortunate.
And touch wood, hopefully it's not finished yet.
Of course not. And many, many happy returns.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
And also, you're very welcome. Also, what I was going to say to you, like they say to me sometimes, where do you think you're going to get buried? You know, and I say, well, I don't know where I am. Wherever I die, they'll just bury me there, and that's it. Oh, and the big thing is, I just say now, for my funeral, if I die here, I say for my funeral, it has to be a private funeral. And I said, I do not want to be in that cold, dank church. You know how I feel about cold. I said, I freeze to death there that night. I don't want to be in that place. So then my second cousin, Christopher, he's the one that has the MS. He just said, he said to me, it's all right. You can come here for that night. So that's settled. That's settled, because you'd freeze to death up there.
Well, thank you very much again, and we're most appreciative of the wonderful trip you put.
I'm glad. I'm so glad. Dear.
Thanks.